On Thursday morning, August 26, a series of explosions and gunfights broke out near the airport in Kabul, where evacuation efforts were taking place. Over the past few weeks, we've been updating you consistently and constantly while having private communications from those on the ground, those in Washington, D.C., and around the country, veterans all across the place, and active duty members as well. Getting information like we got this morning in real time, seeing the effects as it happened, getting videos of suicide bombers, getting pictures of the aftermath, is something I didn't expect when we started this podcast. It's not something that I expected to talk about as the withdrawal began and the calamity of the day where it saw at least 12 U.S. service members were killed. And not just the American service members, but the Afghans as well. I think we would be remiss and mistaken if we didn't mention that hundreds, 150 at current count, Afghans died as well. These people were peace-loving people. They were innocent. They were trying to get out of Afghanistan and out from under the thumb of Taliban rule. It's incredibly difficult to process. I would say that it's impossible. And while we see our country's leaders all across the scope, whether they be Republican, Democrat, Independent, Libertarian, whatever, there is some sense of finger pointing that's going on. There was a congressman that I saw who tweeted out, "Joe Biden equals death to America." There was congressmen who tweeted out, "This blood is on President Trump's hand." These are the exact type of statements that has gotten us to this place where we're at politically and really morally in the country. We have such a cognitive dissonance to the troops on the ground and what they're going through that it's almost unfathomable that this is still the America that I fought for. Looking around and seeing all the different people that constantly want to put the blame on one political party or the other. My plea to you is to stop. We've got to stop. The place that we're going, the road that we're going down, is not a good place as a country. We must focus on what brings us together and what unites us, not the political divisions that we have sowed so frequently over the last 20 years. A lot of blame is going to be placed on President Biden, and rightfully so. A lot of blame will be placed on President Trump, rightfully so. A lot of blame will be placed at the feet of both Presidents Bush and Obama, rightfully so. There is no shortage of those in political power and political office who deserve the blame and the chastising finger from America. However, the time and the place for that is not now. The time and the place will come when the blood is actually dried on the uniforms of those who are fallen. Because right now, there's mothers and fathers hurting. There are service members who are hurting. There's troops that are on the ground still who had to zip up their friends, their battle buddies, into body bags and place them into helicopters and into planes to have their remains fly to Dover to be greeted by Air Force members in full dress uniform. Waiting to salute them for their sacrifices. As someone who's been injured in combat, it slaps differently. I know the sound of my mom's voice when I told her that I had been shot. There's at least 12 U.S. service members whose parents won't get to hear their baby's voice again. There's husbands and wives, children, who will never be able to hear their husband or wives or father or mother's voice again. Those are the things that we need to focus on. If the American government is willing to send troops into combat, we must be willing to do what it takes to keep them safe. We must be willing to do what it takes to keep our allies safe. And we must be ready to accept responsibility when those actions fail. We cannot continue to cast blame on someone else. At some point, somebody needs to take responsibility without a caveat or without a qualifier. That's not happening. It didn't happen with President Biden's speech today. It won't happen from other former presidents. They're not going to do it. They're not going to take responsibility. Why? You're going to hear a story in just a few moments about the best of us. In a moment where social media can oftentimes reveal the worst of us, it also can include the best of us. Chris Davis is one of the best of us. They tried and tried and tried again to get people out of Afghanistan. This is Chris's story. It's incredibly important, and it goes to show that the sacrifices that those 12 made are not in vain. They were doing everything that they possibly could until the last hour, until their last breath, to help secure those who couldn't secure it for themselves. That is the legacy of the 12. What is ours going to be? Think about that while you listen to Chris Davis. All right, now it's 0 Block 30. I'm privileged to have another Marine Major. And you know what? I think if people have listened to this show, they know if I give officers praise, I mean it. It's not something that I do very often as a staff NCO. I'm glad to have Chris Davis on. He's another Major that is running the lines. He's doing all kinds of stuff. And just like Major Schumann that was on the last episode that you listened to, he is doing it outside of his normal responsibilities as a Marine. Like, he's doing his day job as a Marine and doing a night job really as a Marine too, because one thing that I've noticed about Marines, and this is really, and not just Marines, but everybody in the armed forces, this isn't something that you take off just because you're out of the uniform. When you clock out at 5 o'clock or 1700 that day, you don't stop being a Marine. You don't stop being a soldier, an airman, or a sailor. You continue to do that. You have certain values that you want to uphold, and you want to live that and show your Marines and show your troops that that's what you're doing. Chris, that's exactly what you're doing in this process as well. One of the first people that Tom actually said to reach out to if I was having other people, because he was so inundated of what was going on with Zach, he was like, reach out to this guy. He has some contacts too. So I wanted to give you the chance to talk to the listeners about some of the things, because I've pointed several folks to you as well. You had a story, and Tom touched on it a little bit in the last episode, where he said, look, I got to the point where I was so mentally exhausted after helping Zach, I had to start passing off some of these things to other people that were capable. You were one of those people that he views as capable, which is obvious the reason why after talking to you. Explain to us what happened with Tom's other interpreter that you guys got out named Lucky.
Yeah, Chaps, I appreciate you guys having me on this show. I'm obviously a huge fan of your podcast. So I guess back up, I had become familiar with this entire the SIV process, the special immigration visa process, a couple of years ago. And originally, Tom and I had touched base about Zach. I want to say it was probably April timeframe, and we were working the traditional channels. We were trying to get the SIV package approved, working, both a two-pronged attack. We were kind of working the public relations piece. That's, obviously Tom Killzoned that's his shtick. I was working more the legal aspect. That's kind of my background and my shtick. I had a good friend named Adrian Kinsella, and I guess he will come up a lot here in this story over the next 15 or 20 minutes. But all of us were kind of working, hooking and jabbing with Zach when, August 15th, we got the announcement that the Taliban was on the outskirts of Kabul and everything went into hyperdrive. And Tom had been working for days and weeks to get Zach in a place where he might be able to exfil from Kabul, from the country. And we worked for days trying to get Zach there. And, the emotional highs of coordinating movements and coordinating ops, it was exhausting. And I'm sure Tom, talked to you guys extensively about that. But I guess it was, as a Marine, one of the big windfalls that we had was, the Marine Corps, Chaps, we're a small, intimate force. We're like the Kevin Bacon 6 degrees of separation, someone somewhere. But when we got the word that the ground force was going to be Victor 1A, Victor 2-1, I mean, bingo. And within 15, 20 minutes, we knew everybody was going to be on the ground, facilitating security, probably moving folks in and out. And I mean, Tom is the ultimate communicator. He was able to reach out, find who was going to be where, how would be able to move Zach, how to coordinate his movement to and from gates to avoid Taliban checkpoints. We're receiving intel, we're communicating, we're talking, we're doing all this stuff. And we finally get Zach to the gate. He gets onto Kabul. And I think that had to have been, that was probably the 18th or 19th of August, probably the 18th, about 1 o'clock in the morning. And I remember we'd been going pretty hard. I think we were taking 1 or 2 hour naps. I'm sure Tom didn't nap at all. The emotional highs of multiple failed attempts and the success of him getting through the gate, you can't even really describe that kind of that sense of mission accomplishment. Well, I remember I shut my phone down. And I was like, you know what? I still have my job to do. I still work in the Marine Corps. I'm going to set my alarm to get up tomorrow morning, go for a run. And I remember when I woke up the next morning, it's funny now looking back on it. You know Tom, like I know Tom. He has a way of motivating people, I guess is the way of putting it. And I woke up to 3 or 4 text messages. And the text messages were like, hey, Zach's safe, but I got another interpreter for you. It's a guy named Lucky, and that's his call sign. That's kind of what we did to protect his identity. Lucky was my interpreter with 1st Reconnaissance Battalion. I need to turn this one over to somebody I can trust. It's yours. And the line that got me was the last text message he sent. He kind of planted that little that seed was, hey Chris, man, you're his only lifeline. And I mean, what that does inside, your psyche, kind of a challenge, confidence that he instilled in me. I can't really describe it. So I immediately start texting folks, and I'm basically bringing the band back together. All the guys that we had running ops, all the guys we had running logistics, all the administrative folks, everything.
And I want to make a point before you continue here, because I think we have so many young officers, so many young NCOs that listen. What you're describing here is the exact type of leadership that you want to foster in people, where people know you, they trust your judgment. If you could do that, you could build that type of reputation. The things that you can accomplish in the military are absolutely endless. When you get that that reputation that I don't want to disappoint this person because they deserve everything that I could possibly give to a task, that's how you really get mission accomplishment is through relationships like that.
Yeah, and I think what has made me step back as I've tried to step back and kind of gather my thoughts over the last couple of days is we've trained our successors, and we have other people now that are kind of at the pointy end of the spear. It's almost worth taking a step back and thinking, in these couple of days since we got Zach, safe and Cutter and on his way, we had kind of laid in the groundwork for a larger network, which, it's, I don't know who deserves the credit for coming up with that digital Dunkirk moniker, but it's brilliant.
Fantastic hashtag too. People want to pay attention to it.
Great marketing. But what had happened is it wasn't just Tom and I. There were guys like you, Chaps, that were sending, folks our way. There were people that cared about their interpreters. There were people that cared about their Afghan allies, and there were multiple service members, and we were all doing these independent efforts with varying levels of success, but we had all kind of found ways that had worked. Some were working really good admin forms. In the first couple of days of Zach's thing, I was constantly sending requests for evacuation, constantly dealing with veterans that work on the Hill. I was constantly talking to the State Department. Others were working coordination. Other people knew folks on the gate. Other guys knew people that were at checkpoints. Other people knew intel. What Tom and I were able to do is bring a lot of those networks together. And you
guys were essentially the funneling point, because I've been doing this for 5 years on this side, like the media side. Never in 5 years have I ever seen military active, military veteran, and military media be in lockstep in how they were going to accomplish something outside of the government. It was almost like everybody that is involved here was like, we know if we hand it up to headquarters, DOD, or the State Department, something's going to get dropped. We're going to do it ourselves. We're just going to improvise, adapt, and overcome, and we're going to do this ourselves, and we're going to get it done. And you have, like, through leadership like yours and through Tom's and so many other people, it has gotten done. And like you're saying, it's definitely not you, just you two. There is tons of veterans who are working this, like both active and out. Like everybody's involved, and they are so emotionally invested in this, because this is like the interpreter situation and people that deserve to come over here. It's almost like, for us, this is the same thing as leaving a Marine on the battlefield or a soldier on the battlefield. You fought with me. If you got shot at with me, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to get you to where you need to be.
No, you're absolutely right. And the level of, to use another Marine phraseology, I know not all your listeners are Marines, but the level of message to Garcia that permeated through these efforts was insane. I mean, we were building the airplane in flight, and it made me laugh as one of the group chats grew to be about 200 folks, signal text messages. And one of the members changed the group's name to NEO, non-combatant evacuation operations. And I was like, this is awesome. I mean, we were literally running a digital jock from 11,000 miles away, and we're getting our resources here, giving outputs there, coordinating people on the gate. And so that's the level of complexity we had been to kind of outpace the Taliban, who was now, the Taliban had at this point, 3 or 4 days into this thing, they had become more robust. They had adapted to, the enemy always has a say. They had started setting up checkpoints. They had started becoming manipulative, using our uniforms, taking papers off of people. So we were having to make challenging passwords that would expire. We were having roving people coordination. We were everything you can think of in, traditional infantry tactics. We were doing it to stay one step ahead of the enemy. So, again.
And this is flowing from majors and lieutenant colonels on the ground through signal, all the way to like Lance corporals and sometimes civilians that are and be like, hey,
and
Lance
random Karen in Missouri that you're sending me on Instagram.
Right. Like, it started out on like Twitter or Instagram, and the next thing you know, you're talking to some Lance corporal through the Signal app that's outside of a gate who's saying, you in the blue shirt, come here. Like, I know you in the blue shirt. You're on the shoulders. You're coming in right now. Like, that kind of stuff. If this was in a movie, if this happened and it was in a movie and we didn't actually know it was happening, you would have the same type of outcry that we had in the military community after Hurt Locker, where it's like, that's just complete bullshit. It would never happen. 20 years from now, there's going to be a movie about this, and people that don't remember the details are going to say, there's no fucking way that would ever happen. No way.
Yeah. So not only are all these folks, and I would say, if I had to put my thumb on it, 75 to 80% of these folks are either active duty, reservists, or veterans. They've gotten some type of specialized training. So the taxpayer money did bear out.
Right.
Mm-hmm. There was some fruit gained in some of those long-term investments. So we do have
Same
a lot
thing
of
happened with the different civilian pilots, that they steal our pilots all the time. And President Biden was like, good, well, now you guys can fly the refugees.
But you're absolutely right. And so not only do we have this unique training, but it also speaks to our reputation, not only as Marines, but as Americans. So, for example, Tom hands me off his interpreter from 1st Reconnaissance Battalion, Lucky, because he trusts me to bring Lucky home. But Lucky doesn't know me either. And right. I'm going to navigate him through city streets that now have active roving Taliban patrols, checkpoints, and he's going to put his hands in my life, and not just his wife, his 4 very small children. And over the course of the next few days, we're going to pick up his 2 sisters and brother, who are all under the age of 16. He's going to put his entire life and trust in my text messages, in my voice messages, in our phone calls, for no other reason other than I'm a Marine and I know Tom. And that speaks not only volumes to Tom, but the reputation we have forged as Marines, that I guess probably no podcast is complete with a Mattis reference, no better friend, no worse enemy. I mean, that exemplifies it. And one of our failed attempts with Lucky exemplifies it even more. So I guess I'll get right into it. So,
yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what happened. So Major Schumann reaches out to you, says, I have another interpreter. This is yours for action. You've got to step up here and do it. What's your next step that you take in order to get this ball really rolling?
Yeah, so I bring the band back together. I bring in Adrian Kinsella. I notify Tom. I kind of give him like a back brief of what we're planning on doing. And I've got about 4 or 5 people that are just exclusively working Lucky's package. And at that time, the intel was in such a way, what we were hearing from people that were there on the ground, a lot of our contacts that were becoming a lot more robust was just get to Eastgate. You just need to get to Eastgate. It's close enough. The guys there on the gate, they're going to be looking for Lucky. Send us a picture of what he's wearing right now. Identify his children. We've got this. Eastgate is the population there. The crowds are a little bit, there's less folks on the ground. This is going to be easy. And I'm like, you know what? We got Zach in. We're battle hardened at this point. We know what we're doing. We're global Jim. We're not the average Joes anymore.
Right.
And comms go dark. And so what I think what has happened, and as people have experienced this multiple times over the last week, the closer our Afghan allies, our Afghan interpreters get to the gates, there is just so much signal traffic going out of those areas. And these little—
It's like an NFL game, right? Like where you normally have service in this spot. You go there, so many people are pinging off the towers where everything goes away. And Tom had mentioned that maybe it was like a chameleon that they would put over where it shuts down comms. But from everything that's just not the case. They're just overwhelmed with the amount of communication that is going on, where it just essentially shuts down everything.
And that has been always my assumption as well, as I've tried to console folks to be patient in this process. So 14 hours goes by, and I'm pretty down. I mean, this is now really late Wednesday night, East Coast time. I'm carrying this kind of burden on me that this was my guy. I sent him to Eastgate, had people looking out for him, and I got nothing. Our guys on the gate are saying, we got nothing. Folks that we have out in the town, we don't have them out in town, but they're out in town conducting missions. They're not seeing anybody. Just devastating. And when Lucky comes back up on the net, he is, well, not happy with me. He's gone to the hospital because in a melee there outside of Eastgate, and you probably have seen the videos. I think you guys have even shared some of the videos. The Taliban was dispersing crowds by shooting in the crowd. They were causing hysteria. Lucky himself gets identified and gets beat up. He gets just beat up by a bunch of Taliban folks, and his son gets tear gassed. Well, they weren't targeting his son. I'll be more precise, but they throw tear gas into the crowd. It disperses folks, and Lucky has to take his kid to the hospital because he's having an allergic reaction to tear gas. So I've just met Lucky 18 hours prior. I've sent him to Eastgate, and it has failed miserably. He's not only unable to link up, promises are being broken, and he's injured, and I've gotten one of his kids hurt. So to be completely honest, he's not happy with me, and it took some cajoling for attempt number 2. So we regroup.
And that's something that it's got to be hard for you not to take personally too in the moment, because you understand, like, I'm doing everything that I can, he's doing everything that you can, but human nature is, dude, I'm trying to help you here. Like, I'm not the bad guy, I'm trying to help you. But you also, being a smart man and a smart human, like, you understand the feelings and the emotion that he's having, and he wants to take it out on somebody, and you happen to be the man-shaped target that's standing in front of him.
And Tom is a guy of very few words, and I did not want to bother him. I didn't want to bring him problems. It's kind of one of my, one of my own leadership kind of styles. I don't bring my boss problems. He had tasked me with this. I was going to bring him my solutions, so I didn't want to bother him all day. But I updated him with failed attempt number 1, and I told him I was upset. And he says, "Well, we don't got time for that." That's all he said. We don't got time for that. Get back in there. Yeah, that's just Tom, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So second attempt occurred pretty quickly, and probably too quickly. We probably executed a little bit got an opening, heard some intel on the ground at Northgate now. So you got a couple click movement for Lucky to take his family and 4 kids. He still hasn't found his sister and brother at this point. But I'm like, hey, you need to get to Northgate right now. Don't ask me questions, get there. They're going to let you in. And, human factors set in. We had a lot of friction on that attempt. It just was not a good attempt, and we were very unsuccessful. But pretty quickly we realized that just wasn't going to pan out. So we took a big tactical pause, took a step back. I talked to the group. We started coming up with a little bit better plan. Well, this is now at the end of.
And how was that communication between you guys in the Signal app and then talking to people who are actually there? What was that delay in communication like? And was that a huge barrier for you guys to have really successful operations more, I guess, in a row?
So it is scary to think how quick that communications were coming. The last time I was downrange, you were pretty much limited to the the MWR tent when you were on a big base. There weren't all these.
That's what it's hard for me to wrap my brain around, because that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, how the fuck are they even talking right now?
We had no issues talking to anybody, and we were very conscientious. We were very, very, very conscientious to not interfere with troops on the ground. Right? Like, they have a mission, they have things they need to, their security, their force preservation was keen in our minds.
And not only that, but you, as an active duty officer, you'd be fucked if it came back that you interfered with some missions that are presidentially directed. Right. You would be screwed.
And also, we also laughed a little bit about it. This was after the fact. Tom and I have kind of talked about how this was something we were willing to do. We felt very strongly about keeping these promises to our Afghan allies. And quite frankly, the administration was signaling very strongly that there was no higher priority, no higher mission that they had than getting our Afghan allies and American citizens out of the nation. So,
and in internet terms, you guys are just like, okay, cool, bet. We're going to do it.
Implicit mission statement. Yeah. I got my implied task. That was my BPT. So, we were executing. But yeah, when these guys weren't working, or when they had a moment, they were kind of updating us on what things look like on the ground. A lot of, there's civilians on the ground too, and they were giving us updates too. So there were all kinds of folks, both State Department. I'll tell you, the veterans that we have working in congressional offices were instrumental in feeding us information too on official channels. So there were a lot of people bought into this, not just, like I said at the beginning, not just Tom and I working the ops, I guess, if you will. So third attempt was the daring attempt. That was the scary one. That's the one that's kind of made for a movie. So this is at the end of the week. The Taliban is starting to hear our administration signaling, hey, we might be out of here August 31st. And they're hearing in their minds, they only got to outlast a couple of days, and they're getting a little bit more aggressive. And, like I said, we were adapting as well. We had challenge and passes. We were rotating people through safe houses, safe areas that we knew. We were moving them through green zones, just making sure we kept our folks as safe as possible. Never bedding our guys down for very, very long. I mean, this was highly technical, cell phone and laptop coordination. So one of the concerns that I had was the Taliban was they were setting in a little bit more robust checkpoints. And for guys like Lucky that were carrying around all of their information, I was growing a little bit weary of his ability to keep navigating these gates as these checkpoints became a little bit more robust safely. One of the things our contacts had told us was that the Marines are supposed to be there. They're guarding Kabul. They're guarding the airport. They're keeping the flight line clear. But they have been instructed that if there were issues, they don't want the crowd to get unruly. If there are security issues just outside, they're supposed to knock that down.
Right.
So we came up with this plan, and we kind of worked it through all of our sources, and it's now thinking back on it. It was terrifying at the time, but the plan was Lucky was going to take his family down to Abbey Gate. And at this time, Abbey Gate, so about a week ago, so this is about a week after the Taliban's been there, Abbey Gate is highly dispersed. No one wants to be there. Why? Because that was the most robust Taliban checkpoint. That is where people were getting beat up. That's where people were getting hurt. And your average Afghan citizen wasn't interested in that life. They weren't willing to do that. So I tell Lucky, hey man, we're being told,
Jesus Christ.
Especially with kids, right? He's already gotten one kid in the hospital. He's already spent 14 hours, battery dead, no water. So he's like, I don't know about this, Mr. Chris. I don't know. And I'm like, Lucky, there's not many people there. We have a better chance of identifying you in a crowd. And the other thing is too, if the Taliban approaches you, I need you to flash the sign Rocky. Rocky is not something the Taliban are going to recognize, but the Marines, maybe the soldiers, they damn sure are going to recognize Rocky, and they're going to be looking for it.
Right.
So we knew the folks that were probably rotating the gate around that time. They knew to look for Rocky, and the idea was Lucky was going to get close enough to that Taliban checkpoint, and if necessary, if approached, if there was an issue, our guys were just going to get there before the Taliban could hurt his entire family. So that is Friday afternoon, and I
put myself in the position as a father, dude. That's a tough sell, like, because you putting your kids in the belly of the beast that's a huge ask. Like, it shows how dire the situation is when you're willing to do that. When you ultimately decide, yes, this is the course of action that we need to take. It shows how fucking dire it really is.
So, like I know how Afghans communicate, how individuals in that area of the world communicate. They're very poetic and they're very artistic in their description. So Lucky says, "Sirs, you're sending me into a den of lions." That is the message that I last remember. And I remember, my heart is pounding out of my chest. It was so much so that thankfully work was a little bit slow on Friday afternoon. I had to get out of the office. I had to go for a run, and then I got a workout in. And then we, while I'm getting this workout in, when we send them into the fray, and comms go dark, right? My nerves are totally shot. And
it's interesting that is a pretty common theme, because that's when President Obama signed off on the order to kill Osama bin Laden, to go capture him, when they actually signed off the order and they were going, he went out and played golf while it was going, because he just needed that mental vacation just for a second in order to not just go absolutely crazy in his own brain.
Yeah, and I think it might have been President Obama, or it was one of the presidents here recently, and they snapped back at the reporter who asked an indignant question, and he said, "You don't think my problems follow me to the golf course? I'm the president of the United States. Like, I can be reached if someone needs me." So yeah, my nerves are totally shot, and I had to kind of do something to take my mind off of it. And like I said, can you just imagine? He's not clinging to landing gear of a C-17 taking off Kabul type desperate, but we're talking pretty close.
Yeah.
I'm sending him to a Taliban checkpoint, and I'm telling him, just before you get picked up, I need you to flash the sign Rocky, and Marines are going to come get you. Again, the reputation we have built as Marines, the reputation we have built as Americans, it is pretty remarkable that we have earned that level of trust and respect from folks that I had only met Lucky 3 days prior. Mm-hmm. The other interesting thing, just as a Marine, maybe it's the off, I don't know what it is. Lucky went from being Lucky to being my turn. He was mine. Right. Mm-hmm. Like, I had taken full ownership of this guy, and I found myself.
He had PCS into your platoon.
he absolutely had. I was now, he was getting his observed fitness report. He had done commendatory things already to this point. And so we lost comms yet again. And when Lucky when he came back, he was even more hysterical than the first failure. And he was more hysterical than the second failure, because in short, he never made it to the checkpoint itself. He got beat up before he got there. And in fact, not only had he gotten beat up, but his little daughter had gotten beat up. So he's now in hospital visit number 2 in 4 days. And the level of desperation that someone has in that sort of situation, it's undescribable probably for most of your listeners, probably 99% of your listeners, that he has had 3 failed attempts, and he asked me right away, he's like, "When can I go again? We're running out of time." And honestly, the last attempt is not all that exciting. Our last attempt went off pretty much flawless. We had him sent to a gate. We had folks looking for him, and the grab was, there were really no issues with it. But it took us 3 failed attempts over 4 days. We kind of, in between that third and fourth attempt, we kind of gave him time to kind of process things. We had him in 2 different safe houses. We had him moving. And the other, the great thing is Adrian, who was also instrumental in this whole thing. Adrian lived in California. I live here in North Carolina. I'm stationed here in North Carolina. We were able to kind of cover him completely in our comms to allow each other to kind of take naps and do our day job. So Lucky was never really out of total comms with us, except for when we were sending him into these various pickup zones. So that was also huge for just kind of building that trust and building and a constant communication. But by the time the fourth attempt came, Sunday night, East Coast time, and we successfully got him on about 1 o'clock in the morning, Monday morning. I cannot describe the level of relief I have. Actually, I'll take that back. I was not yet relieved because at that point, there was guidance coming down that certain folks weren't meeting the criteria to remain on the airfield. So at this point, it starts coming out in the news that folks were getting expelled from the airport. And I didn't have enough visibility to understand what that criteria was. I knew that Lucky was a vetted individual. He had honorable service. He had gotten his nickname because he had been shot when he was with 1st Reconnaissance Battalion. He had served honorably. He had more letters of recommendation from commanding officers that you would probably recognize by name that wear stars now. We had no doubt he was deserving of a ticket here, ticket home, ticket to wherever he goes or chooses to go. But some people were not meeting that criteria. And I was concerned at that point that maybe some documentation had gotten rustled or...
And because you never know. When the State Department's involved and it's that level of operation, it's really unprecedented in nature, there's going to be things, and I hate to say things that fall through the cracks, people that fall through the cracks, and that's still going to happen. Like it is going to happen. There's going to be people that are left in Afghanistan that have no business being left in Afghanistan. And that's that thing right there is what I really believe most veterans are struggling with. Like people that have spent time in Iraq and Afghanistan looking back, and because you hold yourself to this oath still, like even if I don't wear the uniform anymore, but I do hold myself to that oath still, where if we promise you something, you fucking better get it. Like, because this, in modern society in America, this word entitlement is a dirty word for so many. But the purest form of it, you are entitled to something because you earned it, like like the payment that you receive from the VA or your retirement payment. That's an entitlement because you fucking deserve it. You did something for it. He got shot for America in Afghanistan. Get your ass on a plane and come on and hang out. Let's barbecue.
You're absolutely right. And, I think that, two things. So one of the most devastating things, I think, emotionally for me in the last couple of days, this is a new development, is our successes, our story has gotten out. And now everyone thinks we have the magic potion. And we do. We have cracked a code. We have good contacts. We have incredible people on the ground who, like I said, they have their mission, but they are going above and beyond to honor commitments that they believe that this wasn't communicated. We weren't threatening people to help us. They wanted to help. Other people were helping simultaneously. We just kind of meshed all the efforts, and that's what we were able to do so quickly with resources like Tom, your podcast, getting the message out that this is what was going on. So what occurred after that is, at one point I had 340 some odd unread messages on Instagram. I had countless emails I could not get to. And fortunately, I had kind of shifted my priorities these last couple of days to showing people what I had done, especially civilians, people that are not on active duty anymore, that, are former combat experienced Marines. You've got guys out there like Daniel Gibbons, Tim Tackle, Joe McNamara. These are guys who have served on the ground in Afghanistan and feel just as strongly about this mission as I do. And they're civilians. They're pretty much untouchable. There's no concern there for what they're doing and who they're talking to. So it was good. What I felt. So I invested time into them to show them kind of the processes, and they have done immense work and done a lot of heavy lifting these last couple of days, really taking the burden off me. But the struggle is we are also the first line of vetting in some instances, because like you said, some of these folks we don't have enough time. And
it's impossible. It's an impossible test what the State Department is asking. You're asking folks that were interpreters to show that they were interpreters for either a year or 2 years, depending on which gate you go to. If they have to be a year or 2 years, right. And they don't have documentation. It's not like they went to HR. They didn't go to the DoD HR. A lot of them were paid under the table in cash, and that's just the way that things work. You don't have any documentation in a lot of the ways. I want to kind of transition to where we are now, because when Tom started his and when you took over and did this for Lucky, I like to equate it kind of like the first quarter, second quarter of an NFL game. You're going to get a lot more from the defense in the first or second quarter than you are on the 2-minute warning when the fourth quarter is coming. Everything gets tighter. All the cornerbacks are playing press. You're ready to go, and everybody's locked in. You have 8 in the box. You're not running. You're not doing anything. That's kind of where we're at now, where things are getting a little bit tighter. We're getting, but still the same amount of messages are flowing in, the same amount of people that are getting help. What's your advice to people that are looking to help now, and where do you see this going in the next, really, if you look at the clock that the Biden administration says, the 4 or 5 days that we have left on the scoreboard?
Right. So I guess it wouldn't be appropriate to have this podcast without a effective sports analogy thrown in there. So yeah. I absolutely concur. So I would say continue to reach out to us. I think we're still probably one of the best resources to get you to folks that are going to be able to move bodies or facilitate. One of the things that we've been able to do, and we've been supplementing the administration, we've been supplementing the chain of command, we've just been a value add. We've been helping out with that vetting process. One of the things we did very early when we started getting random people reaching out to us is who's going to vouch for this guy? Who's this random Afghan that you think you're helping? How do you know they are who they say they are? Oh, Chief Warrant Officer such and such in SEAL Team 4 vouches for him. Okay, good to go. Yeah. We'll roll. So one of the things we were doing is we were not sending or encouraging folks to go to the gate that weren't vetted. Right. I have not. I don't know of anybody on that I have worked with over the last couple of days that is,
because that would just be flat out irresponsible.
Absolutely.
And it would take away a lot from what you guys are doing. I have a question for you, because you are active duty. You're still doing your thing as an active duty major. Have you received any type of feedback from higher level commands that is a word of caution, or maybe just be very, very careful in what you're doing here? Have you received some of that guidance, some of that mentorship that you have to kind of watch your own six too?
No, I think I've been prudent on my own. I think I've been in the gun club long enough, and and now I have a law degree. The Marine Corps paid for me to go to law school, so I have been at least cautious. I don't know that I had processed that quick enough. This all happened too quick, and a lot of the major stuff occurred over that first weekend. We've only really been working in real time and having to balance both a full-time job during the day only this past week, when kind of the full press for Zach and Lucky at least had already kind of extinguished. So I'm in that training and mentoring stage of the third quarter, but I still think that we're probably running this thing quicker than you just filling out some Google Doc for the State Department. If you're just now just starting this thing, you don't have the time, quite frankly. I would say, what can people do? Well, our commitment doesn't stop at the gate of Kabul, right? And our commitment doesn't stop necessarily in Doha or Qatar or wherever that flight is taking them to their initial lily pad of safety. What it's really going to take is all these people, all your listeners, all the people that reached out to me, and I've started to communicate this with folks, that we need to start, hey, look, I'm no longer a platoon commander. I'm no longer a company commander. I can start doing the big blue arrow stuff. What is the next step? They're going to be here. In some cases, a lot of our allies are landing on the ground. And the scary thing is, all these movements that we're coordinating with Lucky, all these movements we're coordinating with Zach, the reason they're able to move so quick, sure, primal desperation. But really, it's because the only thing they own is a backpack full of
or an entire family. A whole family has one carry-on.
That's it.
And And that gives us a great opportunity to talk about something that's going to be the next step, because you have your initial course of action, which we're in right now, is the rescue mission. The next step could legitimately be harder, and getting so many folks settled into a community and getting them integrated into a community that values them. And over the last, really, I would say probably 70 years in the United States, the way that the country looks at immigrants and refugees has changed so dramatically from the 1940s to now, where we have got to push that aside. Of all these people that are coming in, show them why you're happy to be American. Show them why you're happy to have that American eagle in your avatar on Instagram or Twitter. Show them, be that person. And there's so many different organizations that, and I'm talking not to you now, but to the listeners, where Catholic Charities, people that listen know I'm not the most religious fellow in the world. Catholic Charities does amazing work. There's going to be opportunities for you to serve where you're at. That's something that Team Rubicon and all those guys, they talk about constantly, is continuing to serve. General Mattis and General Krulak and General Dunford, they always talk about this concept of being a lifelong service member, a lifelong Marine, a lifelong soldier. If you're listening, you have the opportunity to do that. And where you stand, you can make an enormous difference on a family's life by saying, I'll come help them move in. I'll help them find clothes. I'll help them do whatever is needed. Serve again. Like, that's what we're asking you to do, is serve again.
Yeah, don't talk about your philosophy, be your philosophy, right?
Right.
So, and I mean, you were one of the first people that shared information about how to get dip, cigarettes, everything to service members that were in Kabul. And, you know, it took a day and a half because Amazon Prime is
it's remarkable. I mean, we should just shut down like all sorts of supply and just be like, you know what, Bezos, we're just going to subcontract all of our military logistics is going to be you.
I remember getting cookies that were pulverized, wet wipes that were sent 4 months prior, you know, back when I was in country. Now
you know how hard it is to make an Otis Spunkmeyer muffin mold?
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And you know, the only thing that would get to us and be so good is candy and wet wipes.
Right.
But now you can go through an Amazon. There's this wish list, and
people got Red Bulls. They got underwear going. There's going to be new refugee kids that are hanging out in places like where I'm at. Because luckily, I don't know if you saw this or not, Zach is coming to San Antonio where I live. So I'm going to be able to help out directly. I'm super excited about that. But there's going to be refugee kids that are rolling out of Kabul, stepping into Ramstein, and next thing you know, they're wearing Baby Yoda underwear. It's great. It's fantastic.
But you're absolutely right. Like, it is time to, you know, our commitment continues and it endures once you get back. And that first step is, you know, have some pride in we live in the greatest country in the entire world. Just look at what people were willing to do to get here.
Nobody's passing their babies over razor wire to the Taliban.
Absolutely never. I mean, the Taliban are basically trying to posture now to pretend like they're begging doctors and teachers and everybody to stay back because they need to cultivate their next generation of evil, I guess. So, yeah. But yeah, so if you get a chance, or, you know, or don't wait, you know, that's the beautiful thing about like organizations like the Travis Manion Foundation. If not me, then who? Stop pretending like it's going to be your neighbor that picks up and carries the water for you. And that's kind of what happened, you know, when we started this thing with Zach, and then we successfully got lucky. And I think I stopped counting my personal the involvement I had, you know, at like 70 or 75 folks. And I know that in one day, some of the guys that I have trained up in the last couple of days, I mean, they got a busload of 48 last night.
And it doesn't have to be something where you put aside your entire life and you're working 80 hours a week doing this. This could be something as simple as reaching out to one of these organizations like, hey, if you guys need a Costco run, I got a truck. I'll go get all the bottled water, all the toothpaste, all the stuff that you need and bring it back to you. That's the kind of thing that these organizations need, is just logistical support to get it done.
And I remember one of the first, because that was my task with Zach, was frantically filling out these State Department requests for evacuation forms, giving all the information, how to contact you, how to do this. And I remember as those forms were adapting and the government and the State Department was adapting their documents, one of the later evolutions, this is, you know, August 15th, 16th time frame. We haven't this. I think we've had one unsuccessful attempt with Zach. One of the questions was, when they get to the United States, where are they going? And I remember that gave me pause, because I wanted to say it doesn't effing matter. Yeah, like anywhere.
I'm sure they take up 4 cots in any building in the United States.
So I hit up Tom, and I thought this was a little pretentious of me, maybe, but I was like, Tom is in the Naval War College right now, so he's basically living out of probably an apartment for a year in Newport, Rhode Island, where real estate, he's not on wide open.
He's got the most Rhode Island looking spot right now, with like fucking wood paneling and shit on the walls. Like, it looks like he's basically Ron Swanson hanging out and going to the War College during the day.
I mean, there is going to be no better place for his Friday night cigar and bourbon talks than in Newport, Rhode Island, with his polo shirt popped. It's going to be great. Yeah. But then also, I mean, the human factors, he's got really small children. I'm that bachelor major down here in North Carolina, so I went ahead and put in for Zach. I was like, North Carolina, come on. Yeah. I got room for you. I imagine that Zach's lifestyle will not be able to outstrip my means at this time. And so, but that's the power of social media. So you have Tom and you have Corey Miles and a few other guys that have saved their Terps, and they've started GoFundMes, and those GoFundMes are unbelievable with the amount of money they've been able to raise, because again, the genuine generosity of service members, Americans, it's indescribable. We can't replicate that for every single person. That's just impossible.
For every Zach and Lucky, there's a story of a name that you don't know that doesn't have a GoFundMe, that's going to be scraping by and really in a difficult position to feed and house their families. Like, this isn't, I think a lot of people see the refugee story and they're like, oh, well, they're going to be taken care of. The United States government is going to take care of. Sure, maybe initially, but eventually they have to stand on their own 2 feet. And that's a hard task to do. One, when you have a language barrier for everybody, most likely in your family, except for one, it's a very tough road that they have to forge. And even some of the interpreters, their English is good enough to be an interpreter, but it's still pretty broken. So it's going to be a tough road. And especially with the prejudices that the country currently has against the refugee community.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that people they refrain from getting into the arena and helping is they don't believe that they have the perfect way to help. And for the next few weeks, the next few months, you don't need the perfect.
The old adage is so true. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
And I think that's the message, like, in these coming weeks for your listeners or anybody that wants to get involved. You can do something, and it doesn't have to be giving up your
something as simple as a GoFundMe, or as complicated as having somebody in your home. There's in every spot in between.
Setting up places where they can get job interviews, setting up things to get them on their feet so they become, like you said, self-sustainable. Because that's the American dream. That's
what they want too. They don't want to be just fucking sucking at the teat all the time. They want to establish. These folks that did this are not work averse, like in the slightest. If you were an interpreter for a reconnaissance unit or for any unit on the ground, you're not work averse. You are used to working.
And and for those folks that have never served alongside ANA, Afghan National Army, Afghan National Police, they have never served with an Afghan interpreter, they don't know much about the culture. I will say that the Afghan refugees, the Afghan interpreters that are going to be coming to their neighborhoods, that are going to be coming to this country, are some of the most kind, compassionate, and caring folks ever. I mean, Lucky is in a life or death situation, and he's constantly checking up on me. He's constantly like, when do we?
That was Zach's first question. How's your family, sir? Like, after he got to the gate, it's like, dude, my family's in Rhode Island sleeping. They're good. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. How's your fucking family?
Yeah, life's good. I had avocado toast and my pour over coffee this morning. I'm doing fine, Lucky. Thanks for asking.
Right.
How's your daughter that I got beat up last night for?
Yeah. Has the tear gas gone from your son's face yet?
Yeah. So no, you're absolutely right. And so that's the message. You didn't have to be a part of Digital Dunkirk. You don't have to be, or quite frankly, I know that folks that were hitting me up later in the week and they're like, oh man, like, thanks for all that you did. Thanks for all I was like, what are you talking about? You're a part of this team now. You've successfully saved a family of 6, a family of 7. what are you talking about? Like you're now part of the hashtag. Well, for all the folks that, maybe work's too busy, maybe they got young kids at home, there is still a way you can help, because there are thousands of people that are going to be here, and they're going to be here soon. I'm sure Zach is landing any day now if he's not already. In fact, I know Adrian and I were talking last weekend, and there were folks that he had helped that were on the ground in Sacramento 3 days later. So
unbelievable.
We do not have time to come up with a perfect solution. If you have a place to go, I know that, I'm fortunately getting to the age or the point in my life and career where some of my friends are doing some pretty remarkable things. I've had friends that have already run for Congress. And I know that central upstate New York is doing things to welcome refugees, and trying to do some groundswell movement. San Antonio, Sacramento, hell, I know in a town like Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, there's going to be a lot of affinity to try to help some of these brothers and sisters out and get them on their feet. We don't have much to offer here, obviously as a Marine town, they unless they know how to
best haircuts in the world, though.
Yeah, unless they know how to tattoo or strip. I don't know that Lucky's got much of a.
Yeah, I'd imagine not too many of them are going to be signing up to strip. But if you're listening and you want to get involved, I think this is a perfect spot for us to close out. Chris, reach out. His Instagram is Chris_4_Davis. If you want to reach out to him and ask him where you can help, if you live in North Carolina, if you live in the Texas area, obviously you can reach out to me. You can reach out to anybody. Just search that hashtag Digital Dunkirk, and you can see what people are doing there. Find a spot where you can serve again. That's what you wanted to do. You're able to do that, even with the beard this time, which is great. You don't have any, there is no shaved shit required if you're going to help people out, which I'm super stoked about. Chris, thanks so much for your time, man. And thanks for everything that you did and orchestrated and continue to do, and your service overall. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, Chaps, thanks for the opportunity to come on here and talk to you and your listeners.